I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Today's episode is about adapting to our new normal and strategies to deal with what is being referred to as coronavirus anxiety. Because the bottom line is our lives have been turned upside down, and we are already seeing the tremendous physical, mental, emotional toll that coronavirus has brought into our world. And coronavirus anxiety, it is a thing, and it is completely normal. We are all experiencing it. But the good news is that we can also find ways to help counter it, to help offset it. And it is truly, absolutely possible that we can come out on the other side of this a healthier, more positive version of ourselves. And across the world, we are all asking the same questions. How long is this going to last? What happens if I get sick? What about my loved ones, my friends, my family? What about my job? And for the most part, we don't have any answers to these questions. And that's really scary. That fear, that uncertainty, this anxiety is completely understandable because this is a first for all of us. But small steps and really big shifts in our attitude and our outlook can help us to manage these fears, these doubts, this uncertainty, so that all of this doesn't get the best of us. We are incredibly resilient, and we know that we are. We've been through things before. This is the largest scale that I think any of us have been through before, but we know that we're resilient, and it's up to us to choose how we allow this to affect us. Is it going to break our spirit, or will it make us stronger? We'll be joined in just a bit by Dr. Jill West, child psychologist with Oxnard Hospital for Children. She has some guidance for us for talking about coronavirus with your kids and how to handle the cabin fever and the new environments that a lot of kids and families might be experiencing. But before we talk kids, let's first talk about how we are taking care of ourselves. There are some really simple things that have a huge impact on our wellness. And these are simple things that we can start immediately if we're not already doing them. So first, I can't emphasize enough how important this is to make a point of seeking out the positivity. I'm going to say that again. Making it a point to seek out the positivity. And this matters because embracing the happiness and even these smallest flashes of joy that pop up throughout our day, this is going to help us really find those little moments of happiness that really help us to shift to a more positive mindset. It might be fleeting, it might only be temporary, but the more we do this throughout the day, the better our wellness outcomes will be. And these little flashes of joy, they're there, I promise. We just don't always see them. And especially when we feel like this cloud is just hovering over us, it can sometimes be hard to even see through it. But one space that we can look to for inspiration and positivity is the incredible response of so many organizations, from nonprofits to healthcare organizations to Fortune 500 companies. So many are making giant changes in the way that they do business and the way that they work with patients. All of these things are coming together to support frontline workers, support our healthcare team, to support our community. And I'll be covering these in more detail. My next podcast episode is devoted to entirely this, along with interviews with some of these incredibly progressive CEOs, artisans, to kind of hear what they're doing, how they're adapting. And so as we see that companies are adapting, we also have to make sure that we are adapting. Things are not the same. We can't behave as if they're the same, and we have to make sure that we are adapting so that we can find new ways to live in this new normal. So in addition to seeking out the positivity, making space for this positivity, we have to make sure that we are looking for these occasions of that we see and witness of compassion, of strength. It might be something that we witness someone else doing. It might be a story that we read about or hear about, or a friend is passing it along. But these things are there. And so we need to seek them out and intentionally fill our energy and fill our minds with these stories and these experiences of our community coming together. And I know that it's a challenge also, but now more than ever, we really need to do our best to find effective ways to help deal with our stress as much as possible. And that's something that we keep reading, we keep seeing, and those words almost seem kind of empty. Like when we say strategies to manage stress or dealing with stress, it's such a vast, huge scope of emotion there. And it varies so much how we're all experiencing the stress. Our frontline workers are experiencing incredibly different stressors that we can't even imagine. People with a house full of family that they don't usually have with them, or different, there's so many things that we're going through our own experience of this. We're feeling what we perceive as our stress of this entire event. But it's very different than the other people in our lives. Everybody in our lives is going through this and experiencing stress in a very, very different way. So to have a couple of quick flash tips of how do we manage stress, that's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. But what we do know is that we have to find ways that work for us personally. And again, those are going to look very different for everyone. So one thing that I would really encourage everyone listening is be patient with the people around you. Also realizing that while you may think that they're overreacting, or you think that they're blowing something out of proportion way more than you would in that situation, we don't know. We don't know how that person feels. We don't know what their entire experience has been. And we may only see one little snapshot of it, one little glimpse of it. So I would just really encourage everyone to, if we feel ourselves getting frustrated with people around us, whether it's our family, our friends, coworkers, even things that we see on the news, strangers, realizing that we don't know what they're going through. We may think people seem like they are way too serious and overreacting. We may think people are being way too flippant about it. We don't know where people are coming from, and we don't know how different people, the different coping skills that come up. So I think that I would encourage patience there and encourage a heightened awareness of how different this is going to feel inside for every one of us. But what is the same across the board is that chronic stress absolutely wreaks havoc on our immune system. And we know that. We know that chronic stress is one of the worst things for our immune system. And very little is in our control right now. But what we can control is how we try to react to these stressors. And we may have our immediate knee-jerk reaction, but let's try to pause, think through what just happened, what was just said, what did we just encounter, what is that stressor that just came across our plate, and how can we best buffer our reaction to the stressor. And it may be taking deep breaths. In last week's podcast episode, I had mental performance coach Warren Fitzmaurice of Osher Health joining me, and he had a lot of really great tools, some guided meditation. One of the things we talked about, it's my favorite thing, but having a few key words that are very meaningful to you, that are very powerful for you, that mean something and are calming to you. And it might be 2, 3, or 4 of these words. And when we do feel that reaction of stress, that we think these words through in our minds and taking some very deep breaths. And with each breath in, with each inhale, we are thinking of one of these key words. It might be strength. It might be power. It might be positivity. It might be something completely different that's meaningful for you. But taking this deep inhale in with the word strength and thinking and focusing on that deep inhale, thinking of bringing in all the strength that you can. And then with that deep exhale, we are releasing the negativity that is in our bodies, that we're holding, that we're hanging on to, that we've been exposed to. That's a very simple thing, and we can do it anywhere. I find that works for me. It's very simple, and I kind of have those couple of few words that are calming, they're soothing to me. And as Warren pointed out last week, one, we're training our mind to slow down a little bit, but we're also reminding ourselves to do that deep breathing, which we know 100% the deep breathing, bringing that oxygen deep into our bodies, is also huge for managing our stress response. It lowers our heart rate, it can lower our blood pressure. So, finding things that what's going to work for us to we can't eliminate. There's no way the stress is going to go away. And if anything, it's going to heighten before it gets better. But what can we do to help buffer our reactions to this? Another big thing that I would encourage everyone is to set boundaries on our exposure to news and especially coronavirus updates. Now, we have to stay informed, of course. We need to be responsible, but we need to make sure that we are taking time away from the news, from that, to separate our thoughts, to separate our energy, to separate our focus so that we can bring in that positivity into our world. And so one of the things that we'll be talking about in a little bit is kind of setting a schedule for your day. A lot of us are working from home now, and it's going to look very different than it did when you're going into your office. But as we look at setting the schedule, and we're talking about setting boundaries on our news and our exposure to this, set those windows of time. Is it maybe a window of 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at the end of the day, whatever it is that you feel like you need in order to see what the latest updates are, what's happening, stay informed, but not continually to saturate all of your senses with this. Another great tool to incorporate is something called habit stacking. And this is a term used by the folks at Thrive Global. If you're not familiar with Thrive Global, this is Ariana Huffington's wellness platform, thriveglobal.com. It's an incredible resource for all things positivity and wellness. So if you haven't seen their site, visited it, this is, I've always, loved Thrive since the book came out and since the online platform came out. But it is a really great resource for all the things we're talking about today. So thriveglobal.com. But anyway, one of the things that they talk about a lot is habit stacking. And this refers to adding in a new habit that we're trying to build, layering this in on top of an existing habit. And the reason why is that this creates kind of a built-in reminder for that new habit to take hold and to really sink in. So one example that I really like is like the gratitude hand wash is what we're calling it. And so what is a gratitude hand wash? Well, when you're washing your hands, we know that we need to take an extended time of soap and water, especially now with everything going on. And so we hear, okay, you could sing happy birthday twice. That's how long you need to continue to wash your hands with soap and water. Or you can take that time, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, to think of 1, 2, or 3 things that you're grateful for. And so if you're going to be doing something anyway, like washing your hands really thoroughly, use that time and really think very focused on and very intentionally, not just passively, but really bring to the forefront of your mind what is one thing that you're truly grateful for. And sometimes it might feel like a struggle to find even that 1 or 2 or 3. But using that time that you're already going to be doing something like washing your hands to reflect on the good that is in our lives. And you've probably already heard this a lot already. I mentioned it just a bit ago, but if you haven't done it already, another big factor in adapting to our new normal is to develop a schedule. Develop a schedule for yourself, for your family if needed. Having a daily routine in place will help us to feel more in control. Everything else is spiraling around us, but at least having our own routine in place gives us that sense of control. Not only that, though, it's not just about kind of having that control of our immediate space or time around us, but when we have that routine, it also makes it easier for us to make room for what really matters. And when we have things kind of scheduled in and we know that during this window of time, I want to do this activity or call this person or whatever it might be, we're much more purposeful throughout our day as opposed to reactionary. So when we don't have a schedule, we feel like the day flew by. We feel like nothing got accomplished. What did I even do today? But when we do have a schedule, we at least know that certain things, things are going to pop up. Things are not controllable. We are going to have those things that are flying at us and we're dealing with them as they come. But for the most part, if we can try to have some sort of a routine in place, it gives us that sense of control, helps us to make room for what really matters. And routine has been shown over and over and over to benefit our emotional health. It can help us to strengthen those healthy habits. So if one of the things that's one of your goals is to do a daily walk while you have more time at home, fitting in, when are you going to do that throughout your day? It can help us to strengthen these healthy habits that we're trying to build. It can help us reduce our stress. It can help us cope with all the change when we do have some level of routine. So if you haven't done this already, or if you've done it some, but not really all the way, start thinking about what your daily schedule currently looks like in terms of sleep, work, especially for those working from home, family time, time for movement or physical activity, your meal times, your chill time. What are you doing when you're relaxing? What does it currently look like? When are you fitting these things in? What does your sleep pattern look like? What does the window that you're working looks like? What time during the day do you have carved out for that movement, for family time, for relaxation time? Do you already have some of these kind of things scheduled? And if not, what can it look like? And what's going to be reasonable and feasible, kind of given the limitations on what's around you? Understanding that completely, a lot of our friends have multiple kids at home, and the idea of a schedule is something that seems very, very far away. But we also know that kids do a lot better with boundaries and a schedule and guidelines to, these guardrails to stay within. So thinking of what does this look like? So even if once the entire family wakes up, it might feel like mayhem. Okay, well, what about that window of time if there's a quiet time in the morning before everybody's up? Is there a window that you can have a morning routine that kind of sets your tone for the day, helps you start out with that feeling of positivity, of mindfulness for the day? And that morning ritual, that morning routine might only be 5 minutes. It might be 10, it might be 30. For a lot of people, again, it's different for a lot of people. It might be after everybody goes to bed. You have a certain way that you like to unwind at night. You have certain things that you like to read or do. For a lot of people, though, I hear them say that it's that first thing in the morning, before the whole day starts, that morning routine that really sets the tone for their day. So whether it's waking up and right when you wake up, you are stretching, you are doing some mindfulness exercises, you're reading something that is a positive devotion, positive inspiration. If you have what your wellness routine is, your health routine, I've mentioned on this podcast before, I do apple cider vinegar first thing in the morning, so I'll wake up, have apple cider vinegar. I'll do some, if I have the time that I'm able to do a workout first thing in the morning, I like to do that. I also really enjoy if schedules of phone calls, meetings, conference calls allows, making sure I'm trying to carve out a little window of time to have that morning cup of coffee with my husband. Then start to review my list of projects or calls or things for the day. But what is it that's going to kind of give us that window of normalcy and give us that sense of normalcy to start our day? So then through our day, when talking about a schedule, making sure especially for those working from home, that you're blocking off windows of time for those focus hours or your productivity hours. That might be 1 hour at a time or 2 hours, but scheduling it as much as possible like you normally would schedule your meetings or calls or with work. And because just as we know at the office, things don't just happen. We have things scheduled to remind us of when to do things. Still follow through with that now. And when we do kind of carve out that time, letting the family know that this is your window of time, that for this 90 minutes or whatever it is is going to be your focus time, your work time, your productivity time. Take a break, and then you may have another chunk of time, another increment later, another increment later. Communicating with the people that are in your space so that y'all can hopefully do your best to navigate and each other's boundaries, and hopefully if someone needs a space of quiet, the other can plan for whatever it is to not be right in that space with you. But communicating ahead of time what your things are that you kind of need through the day. And ideally, if you've got multiple people in the household with you, you can try to schedule who's in what space at a certain time. Let them know you need to have this area quiet because you have a call and whatever it might be. But communicating is going to be huge, and setting that schedule is going to be huge. And when we are kind of in that focus time, because it's going to be really limited for a lot of us, when we're at home, we have so many more distractions. So at least if you have that window of time that you are able to carve out, turn your phone over, turn off any distractions from email so you don't get pinged with emails, texts, or phone calls. Don't look at social media. Make the most of these little windows of time that you are carving out for yourself. Again, realizing this is not going to be feasible for a lot of people if you're layering in homeschooling with working from home, but as best possible, trying to coincide what each of us are doing so that we can try to help support each other throughout the household. And then making sure that you're taking breaks, scheduled breaks through the day, and make what you're doing during that break fun. Not checking into the news or looking for the latest updates or scrolling through social or kind of going through things that might induce some anxiety. Instead, take the time to make a lunch, enjoy it with the people who are quarantining with you, or go for a walk, read a magazine, sit outside, get some fresh air. Call a friend, especially if you've got that friend who's always going to make you laugh or who has a positive attitude, whatever it is. But making sure we take these little kind of micro breaks through the day. And then the last thing I would say is that as we're kind of looking at that schedule for the day is, when are you going to stop work? And for a lot of people who maybe live by themselves, they're working from home, it can be hard to not just keep working because it seems like nothing's ever finished. There's not a boundary. There's not everybody's leaving the office, so I'll leave. It can be really easy to just keep working. So make sure you're setting these boundaries for when are you going to stop work and what are you going to do in the evenings. One thing I like to do that just really helps me from a feeling like I've got, again, there's stuff that's swirling all around us, and like, what can we do to help minimize that? At the end of the day, each day, I'll run through the list of all the things that were kind of the to-dos, and I'll scratch off what I accomplished. I like it on paper. I do a lot of my meetings. I do a lot of the stuff is all digital. I'll use online calendars for that, but I really like the handwritten list because for me, it's very satisfying to scratch off the things that I know were accomplished. But then I'll also rewrite this list as needed. And because a lot of times throughout the day, that list started out clean. I've added, kind of jotted down notes and more to-dos in the margin of it or whatever throughout the day. So at the end of the day, I like to scratch off what was done and then rewrite that list. And it's just basically a little half page of the things that are what I'm trying to do either that day or that week. It's not necessarily long-term things because that can be really overwhelming. I have a separate list for those long-term things. And those are big projects that I'll kind of have to chisel away at. But this list that I'm talking about, it's kind of here's what I want to accomplish today, tomorrow, this week. And I'll rewrite that list at the end of the day. And for me, it's sort of a mental housekeeping, a mental cleanup, because it helps me see what I've accomplished, but it also details out what I still want to accomplish, again, whether it's going to be for the next day or the coming week. You can do this digitally on your computer. Like I said, I prefer handwritten, but doing this at the end of the day can kind of almost help give that closure. And again, it's that little like mental cleanup, that mental closure that I have that helps me kind of step away from the work productivity part of the day and try to ease into, okay, what's downtime going to be for this evening? And so when it is evenings, weekends, or the downtime, kind of following up on the adapting ourselves, we need to be sure that we're being really proactive and trying to fill our downtime with things that we really enjoy. So again, it could be walks with the people who are our family or our quarantine mates. It could be cooking dinner. It might be experimenting with a new recipe, reading a magazine or a book that you love, or had been wanting to get to, didn't have the time to, movies, projects that you wanted to try or start or do, but didn't feel like you had the time. So making sure that these things, you are actively incorporating these, because these are, again, going to help offset the negativity and the fears and the uncertainty that's swirling around us. So all of this is just truly the tip of the iceberg. And so things like making space for positivity, finding ways that we can do our best to buffer our reactions to stress, habit stacking with things like the gratitude hand wash, finding ways that you can make your schedule work for you as much as possible. I encourage, especially if you can find that little time for even as brief as it might be, a morning routine that kind of sets your tone for the day. Setting boundaries on your work. When are you going to stop work? And then how are you going to transition from the end of the workday into your relaxation time? Because a lot of times you're not going anywhere. You're still staying in the same place. So how are we going to make that feel different for us to start that downtime, that chill time? So again, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg for how we can best take care of ourselves during this time. But I would just say continuing to surround yourself with positive messaging, following wellness experts on social media. And those, if you are going to be on social media, following those people the wellness experts who are sharing true stories of inspiration and self-care and real guidance and real strategies that we can really use. So tuning into these simple things can have a huge impact on our wellness. And again, everything that we just talked about, these are things that we can start right now. So now, shifting gears from us to our families and guidance for talking with kids about coronavirus, we are joined by Dr. Jill West, child psychologist with Ochsner Hospital for Children. She's here to share her strategies as well as tips to cure cabin fever. So welcome, Dr. West. I'm excited to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Molly. I'm excited to be joining the podcast.
And so tell us about your role with Ochsner, with the Ochsner Hospital for Children and child psychologist. I know that, right now we're in the heart of coronavirus, but typically what does that look like and what does that role look like?
Sure. So child psychologists do all kinds of different things. We participate with children, adolescents, their families in lots of different aspects of care. My specific role with Ochsner Hospital for Children is pediatric psychology. In practice of child psychology in general, we're thinking about ways to help children and their families with thinking strategies, emotional strategies, and behavioral strategies to enhance functioning, to improve their lives, or to overcome something that's a challenge. Sometimes that's medical, sometimes that's something that's going on in their family or something that's going on at school, something that's going on with friends. So we try to think about all different parts of children's lives and approach them.
And this is a huge element of this. It's, this is, doesn't kind of fall into any of our traditional avenues that we are working with people, but this has almost kind of become its own entity, its own issue for us. And also I look at it of everything that's happening around us now, and it's way too soon to tell. We'll have, only time will tell us, but how this is going to impact us as adults later, kids later, it's what's it going to look like in 6 months, a year, 5 years, for people who are going through this now. But for parents now, talk to us first about why it's so key for us to be open with and talk about coronavirus with kids.
They absolutely understand that something is happening. Whether they are a toddler, a school-age child, a teenager, they understand that something's happening, that something's different. And that's because their lives have changed in some way. Their parents might be home at times, but they normally aren't. Or their parents might be away at times that they normally aren't. If they're, a hospital worker, for instance, and taking extra shifts. Their schools are probably closed or their daycares are closed. they're not able to see friends. They're not necessarily able to go to parks or museums or zoos, things that would be kind of quote unquote normal for a child's life. Almost all of those things have changed. And so why it's important to talk about it is because they understand that something has changed. Even parents who have done an excellent job of shielding their children from news or from conversations about the virus, they still know that something has changed. And perhaps most basically, what we know is that children and teenagers make decisions or have emotional experiences about what is happening in a situation based on how their primary caregivers are responding. So I think that we can probably pretty confidently say that most adults are feeling pretty anxious and stressed about this situation. And so kids are picking up on that.
So as earlier in this podcast episode, we were talking about, strategies to manage stress. And I kind of acknowledged that it's a really easy sentence to come out. Oh, find strategies to manage stress. But wow. But we really do need to find these things that work for us personally to help us keep that in check and to feel some level of control over our own emotions, because our kids they're reading us, they're picking up on it, and they're kind of emulating how we're responding to it.
That's absolutely true. And yes, with all of these strategies, the ones that you've talked about and the ones that I'll share as well, these are not things that are quote unquote easy, right? No, this is not easy. This is not automatic for most people. This takes some additional mental effort. And a lot of us are feeling like our emotional resources are probably pretty tapped out right now. So it does take some conscious awareness, taking a moment, taking a break, stepping back, and having some self-compassion about what's realistic to accomplish right now. And those kind of small pockets of opportunity throughout the day are probably going to be the thing that make a big difference. So a good kind of overall approach to structuring the conversation is to use an acronym that's easy to remember, which is AIR, A-I-R. And that stands for ask, inform, and reassure. So asking kids what they already know, asking what concerns or fears they have related to what's going on. That's really important because it communicates a couple of things. First, it lets your kids know that you are okay talking about this, that it's not a taboo subject, that if they have questions or concerns that they can ask them to you. And they might not know that unless you kind of consciously open up that line of communication by asking questions. I think the other part of asking questions or the ask part of this acronym that's important to consider is questions are good. Listening is even better. So if you ask a question and that starts a dialogue with your child and they're able to ask some questions, the best way to respond to their questions, of course, the I in this acronym is inform. So of course, giving them some information, but also just reflecting back some of their concerns. So if they say, I heard that Susie's dad has the virus, and you say, wow, you're concerned that Susie's dad might be sick. Sometimes just reflecting back what they've said, what their question is, or what they're bringing up, opens up the line of communication for them further. So that's another good thing to keep in mind. So after you ask some questions to them about what they already know and they're sharing some information with you, you can also just reflect back some of what they're saying as a way to let them know that you've heard them. So the I in the acronym is inform. That's pretty straightforward. Give them some information. What's not straightforward is what to tell them. How much can kids tolerate? How should we be telling them this information? Those are some considerations that maybe are a little bit more complicated.
Is that what you were referring to at the developmental level when you're kind of deciding what to include?
Yes. So certainly that's a consideration, developmental level. Some just kind of basic things to think about though. Remain calm, provide reassurance. When kids ask, am I safe? Is our family safe? Am I going to get this virus? They're not really asking, am I safe ever? Are there any threats to me? They're asking, am I safe right now?
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time we can answer that question affirmatively. Yes, you're home. We're following these precautions. We're washing our hands. We're not visiting with other people right now. We're staying away from school. Those are the things that we're doing right now to stay safe. It's important to kind of make sure, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but just that if kids are, and especially this is true for teenagers or kids who have their own devices that they can access, just kind of have a sense of what they're viewing. If they are looking at news on their own, or if they have subscriptions to any kind of outlets on the phone where they're getting alerts about what's going on, and just kind of helping make sure that you have somewhat of a sense of what your kids have access to,
also
and trying
what
to help.
Friends are saying through texts and social media platforms, I would think.
Absolutely. And then as you're informing your kids, being honest and accurate with them. So it's okay to tell kids what's really going on. It's okay to say, this is a difficult situation. People are getting sick, but it's also okay to let them know the things that you or your family are taking, the precautions that you're taking to prevent it affecting your family. And so that loops into the R in our acronym, which is reassure.
Mm-hmm.
So again, making sure that your kids really do understand the truth about this situation. Kids aren't really great at euphemisms. So giving them factual information in a calm and reassuring way is important. But then also letting them know, again, the things that they can do and the things that your family is doing to stay safe.
So AIR being ask, inform, and reassure. And this is going to look very different based on age, but also probably based a lot on the type of information that historically you typically share with your children. So sometimes some parents may be very open about a lot of the things going on within the family or other dynamics, whereas other parents might be a little bit more guarded with it. So all of that's going to vary some based on all of those factors. When you're talking about the inform and you're talking about how much detail to include, I don't know if this is an easy answer or not, but what's too much to share with kids, or what's that sweet spot of giving enough facts without bringing on hysteria?
What's most important is to help children understand how it is affecting their entire world. So if you're able to say, well, you know how normally on Tuesdays and Thursdays we go to karate lessons, and right now we're not able to do that. I've talked to, so-and-so at the karate gym, and they hope that we'll be back to the karate gym soon once all of these restrictions are lifted. That's just an example of linking it to that child's world, which is the most important to them. So telling them, well, cases have leveled off in China, but it's still pretty bad in Italy. That's not going to be that's not going to be the level of information that kids are either A, able to understand, nor B, do they need that level of detail. The other thing to think about is that kids often imagine situations as being far worse than they really are. And kids kind of have a natural tendency to blame themselves for things that are happening. So those are other just sort of key things to consider when, giving them information that's accurate, but that's why that reassurance component of it is really important too. So they know what is happening as it affects the communities that matter to them, but also with helping them temper that and and hopefully not have it be that their imaginations kind of run wild with all of these worst case scenarios.
So keeping it very specific to them, relevant to them, and when possible, giving them examples that they can like tangibly see in front of them of here's what we're doing, or here's what's different, or here's how we're being safer, here's what we're doing to help our family. Let's talk about kids who are cooped up. So as you and I are actually recording this, the weather has been gorgeous. We know it's not always going to be that way. So now people can get outside, and if it's a pretty day, they can, we've seen more people riding their bikes. We've seen people doing a lot of chalk art on the sidewalks and driveways, on walks with their parents. Yes. And it's been just like almost like a throwback for, several decades back of seeing the community just being outside like this. But when we are looking at things inside of the home to keep kids from climbing the walls, or parents from climbing the walls, what are some just things that are creative? I know a lot of parents are doing school and class and they have their lesson plans for that. But beyond that kind of stuff, what are some fun things that you can recommend for them?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start by saying there are tons and tons and tons of ideas on outlets like Pinterest and YouTube and parenting blogs. And so I will in no way be able to do justice to all of the creative ideas in this conversation, but I will, again, with developmental considerations in mind, go over a couple of highlights of activities that parents might consider doing with kids at different age groups to help pass some of this time where we're restricted from doing what's normal for our families in some senses. For the toddler developmental level, again, we're kind of thinking of somewhere between 18 months and 3 years or so, doing a color scavenger hunt. So kids, as they're starting to learn their colors, you can send them off looking for different things around the house that you've hidden. Not anywhere too difficult, places where, it's easy for them to find so they don't get frustrated, but a little bit of a challenge. Do a dance party.
It's also educational about colors of,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You could, depending on how enthusiastic about it, you could do that, with colors or shapes, any objects that you can kind of send them searching for. And another thing is to, again, to do something like a dance party. That's usually something that kids can get some energy out. They're moving, they're being physical, bouncing around, and kind of also still keeping them somewhat contained when they're not able to maybe race back and forth or ride their tricycle or climb on a jungle gym.
And I think that's one where seeing like mom and dad also dancing is hilarious for a lot of the kids, just being like silly. There's also, to that point, there's karaoke apps, and something like that can also be fun or silly as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And actually another thing to look into is kinder music, which is it's almost therapeutic music activities. And they have the availability to do some of those activities right now anyways. They offer in-person classes usually, but right now, of course, they've moved a lot of that virtually. That's another good way to do almost like a music therapy kind of an activity with your kids. So you can check out that.
Very cool.
People can check out that website as well. And then, for older kids, I think there is ideas like, and Molly, you'll probably appreciate this and probably have some ideas to add, but taking some items from a pantry and doing a cooking show, having kids pull together the ingredients or the supplies that they need to do a quick meal prep and have them kind of do that and talk through the steps of what they're doing and make that a fun, interactive idea. And also then they're contributing to helping with something that parents are finding themselves having to do more and more of that they might not be used to for their school-aged kids, which is preparing, in addition to breakfast and dinner, lunch also.
Right.
So having kids kind of maybe do some creative participation with that.
And we have, with our Eat Fit dietitians, we have Eat Fit dietitians around the state. And each week, each region is doing a different recipe. And we're calling it #EatFitDIY so that people can find recipes on our Eat Fit smartphone app or from the Eat Fit cookbook. Or also, a lot of people are eager to replicate some of their favorite Eat Fit dishes that they can't currently get at their favorite restaurants right now. And so our dietitians are doing this. Well, one of our dietitians in Baton Rouge has 3 kids. And so she has almost her blooper outtakes of her doing the recipe video with the 3 kids helping. And it was hilarious. And so I think even if you did it almost like, you know, tape the kids. And that's something that, you know, if you're comfortable with it or, you know, however people feel about social, some of those are going to be hilarious to just share with friends or family, even if you're only texting it to friends and family. And it can be really simple because it could be something like they're going to take a wrap and then they're going to slice it and, you know, fill it with things that are going to be colorful and then helping them slice it and make pinwheels out of it. You know, it doesn't have to even be like a real recipe that's cooked and stuff like that. But
sure.
I think
I know a lot of parents are uncomfortable with kids using
yeah.
knives or stoves, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
I think, like you're saying, there's ways to do that in a really that's still very fun, but that's also safe and not highly complicated.
Another thing I'll encourage is we have a junior chef challenge that we typically do each year as part of our home and garden show, which got canceled this year. But one of the things that the junior chefs do who are in this, and it's junior chefs is what we call it, but it's kids who like to cook, and they are kids that are not necessarily chefs or going to any type of culinary training. We just call it the Eat Fit Junior Chef Challenge, and they're taking recipes that they really like or family favorites, and in most cases, looking to see how can they make it over to make it more nutritious. And so that's also a fun activity for older kids is if you do have something that, you know, everybody likes it, but you know it's really not that great for you, but how could we make it maybe not all the way healthy, but what are some things that we could do to maybe recipe ingredient substitutions and stuff? So with the older kids, I think that that's really fun. Great ideas. Okay. Now I think these are all fantastic things. And then what are some other kind of just like out of the norm things that you've heard of families doing when they do have a lot of house time?
Sure. So I think one idea that I love is to do sort of a family challenge to have everybody in the family contribute to coming up with creative activities that can be done in light of the restrictions that are going on. I think it's fun to have families, you know, take turns writing those down on pieces of paper, sticking them in a jar, you know, calling it an activity jar, and then, you know, once or twice a day, pulling something out of that jar and when possible, everyone in the family participating in that activity. That doesn't have to be anything particularly complicated. It might be playing a board game.
Right.
It might be, you know, it might be doing something else around the house that we all maybe haven't done in a while because we've been busy being out of the house. And now that we have an opportunity to be back in the house, we might be able to do that. And so I think that's kind of a fun idea to allow everybody in the family to be coming up with ideas and activities. And also, quite frankly, taking a little bit of the burden off of parents to be the only ones generating ideas. Kids are really creative, and kids are able to get out of their own ways with their creativity sometimes in ways that adults can't. So leaning on them to generate some of the ideas, I think, is also really fun.
And so these are all like, I think, super useful. And I think, like you said, I really love the idea of getting the kids' input, putting that all kind of into the jar. And then, you know, sometimes they're going to love what's pulled. Other times they're not going to love what's pulled. And for parents who are listening, are there any resources that you would steer them to online? Or is there a way if they wanted to contact you directly that we could give them information?
Sure. Yes. I'm happy to share a contact if people want to reach out to me directly. I'll also share a couple of links. Guess one of the other kind of unconventional things that's happening that I think is really fun and really cool A lot of places that we would normally take children to are, of course, not open right now, but they're doing some really fun things in terms of virtual tours. There are zoos and aquariums and museums across the country that are offering access to their exhibits and to their destination completely virtually. So we can link to a couple of those. I think that's another really fun thing to have families think about. And we can share a couple of resources of other places where parents might get some ideas of how to cure that cabin fever.
Okay, I think these are all great. And to our listeners, we'll have the links that Dr. West sends. I'll post those in our show notes of today's episode. So thank you, Dr. West, for your time. This has been really valuable. It's a lot of information that I'm sure parents have been thinking about, things that's going to be useful that they can put into play starting right now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. It's been my pleasure. And just to reiterate, parents, have some self-compassion as well. This is a really challenging time. None of us have been through this before. Now is not the time to try to be super mom or super dad, but there are some things that you can do within these constraints and even amidst the stressful environment that's going to be great for you and great for your kids. So good luck and be well and be kind to yourselves.
Well said. I think we'll wrap on that note. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Molly.
So to our listeners, I hope that you were able to take away at least a few new things to focus on, to make a priority, to help incorporate wellness and positivity as best possible. And we are grateful to Dr. West for joining us and sharing her insight as well. As always, I'll include the links that we've talked about in the show notes of this episode. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com. And you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.